with me today, I've got Mike Layton, former president and CEO of Stochastic Marketing. So I think to get started, would be neat a little background. So, Mike, I think I met you. I think it was 2017 at one of the events, and it was 2017.
Probably, yeah. That sounds about right. Yeah, right.
So I think what was interesting is I know when I first got into the space of working for Fred, I used to go to these events. For me, I wanted to get as much knowledge as possible with kind of what was going on, and I noticed there were a lot of marketing companies, at these events. What you did was just very unique, and I remember having a conversation with you, and getting an understanding of what you did with Stochastic, and running back to Fred, and I'm like, oh my God, this is By the way, this our office at that time was off of Glades. We're in a different area now in Boca with obviously with more staff, which is nice to see our growth too. Um, I said, holy shit. I mean, the stuff he talks about, nobody gets, nobody understands. I mean, the clients that you had understood marketing, on a much different level. So I'm going to do the best job explaining what you were doing with Stochastic, and then you can jump in just to show you that I listened and I still remember from all those years ago. So Mike had Stochastic was a direct mail business, direct mail company for the HVAC space for residential services. And where Stochastic got really, really unique is in the fact that they would go back and grab all of your clients over your last 7 years. And they would do a detailed report basically on the zip codes that have been the most successful for you, where you have generated the most amount of revenue, and said, listen, here's the outlier zip codes. You don't need to waste your money going to there. Here's the ones where you're making your bread and butter. So not only were you saving your clients a ton of money in really exacting down the data to where things were going to work the best, but you were hitting their target client over and over and over again. And I don't remember how many clients you had at your biggest. I think it was north of 100. Does that sound correct?
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you have about 40 clients on your website as customers of yours that were also customers of ours at some point. So, I mean, really, before I started Stochastic almost 20 years ago, I had spent decades roaming the country, and I owned and operated catalog call centers, print and mail facilities, fulfillment houses for Fortune 500s or catalogers. So that may either have been all the plot signs for Monsanto that went to every farmer, all the ticket stock for United Airlines, horses, saddles, pharmaceuticals, food, you name it. So, but one of the things that really had happened is all of those industries, all those Fortune 500s. I mean, Monsanto knows every farmer in America
Right.
that buys their product. Insurance companies know who sells what products, and the independent insurance agents, they know what they sell, they know what they produce, and catalogers in particular know who their customers are, right? And they can track and have for 25 years or longer, actually, every attempt to reach a customer, and they know the lifetime value of that customer. Um, and so accidentally, while selling those kind of services to the franchise wars of the world, Applebee's or whatever, I came across a guy named John Young from Clockwork Home Services
Sure.
accidentally. I mean, I didn't know anything about the industry. And he kind of said to me, how do you make contractor marketing more efficient? And I said, well, tell me more about your business. A little bit like you coming from outside the industry, right? And he said, well, anybody with a 12-year or older owner-occupied single-family dwelling is a good candidate for residential HVAC, plumbing, and electrical. And a lot of people are familiar with the whole Airtime 500 or service experts or any of the kind of things that he built in his career. He's one of the original kind of inventors of the industry. So when he said any house is a candidate, I just kind of said, oh, okay. Well, statistically, they all obviously nobody's living in a tent. At least people that are going to write a new check. So I said, statistically, they're not, equal value. So basically, everything that he told me about contractor marketing was wrong. I mean, it was nuts. So what we did is first thing you had to do is figure out how to get the data. which we got their invoice data, and we started to build and look at the analysis, and the numbers just showed that there was a significant statistically expected geographic concentration of customers. So to your point about zip codes, it's the old bell curve square. A guy could be in a St. Louis or Las Vegas, and he would be advertising on radio or television or carpet bombing everybody with mail, and over and over for 20 years worth of data. The statistics would be, okay, 90% of your revenue comes from 30% of the people that you buy from or that fit the model, and that's who we would mail to, right? It's just those people, and how to trim it down. And so it's been, and that's true whether they're buying from you from radio, television, internet, or whatever. Old people with money or who buys all the stuff that your customers want to sell. And that was really our focus for 20 plus years, right?
Well, listen, it was an absolutely impressive model, right? It worked very, very well for your clients. I mean, your clients stayed with you for years, right? They never left. There was no reason to. You were doing something. I think what I remember when I was saying to Fred, I'm like, it's so counterintuitive. It's not this, hey, let's, spray and pray type of scenario. I said there is actual method to the madness. And I remember over subsequent years, more and more conversations we would have, I'm like, I actually think you're an evil genius in a sorts.
But it's a fascinating thing about what you do for a living. Like everybody, I'm assuming everybody that's listening to this is a current business owner or a former business owner.
Right.
So, you're busy grinding the sausage. So it's really interesting to kind of talk to guys who are smart guys, right? Your
Yep.
HVAC guys, I mean, they understand marketing, they understand HR, they understand the technology associated with it. And more, they're also turning into mini PE guys, right?
Yep.
They go from like we have a cigar box where we keep all the money to now they're able to tell you EBITDA and ratios and turn like, okay. So when you're talking to those guys, there are some really smart individuals that you have the benefit of having conversations with, guys like yourselves, guys like your teams, right? And so you learn from them, and there's that cross pollination. But a big part of it is just like, okay, you're convinced that you're right about something, but here's what the numbers show. Tell me what you see differently, right?
Right.
And well, my business is unique, and it's like you or I going to the doctor and you say, well, I've got something I've never felt before. What do I have, doctor? And he'll go, well, given your age and so forth, it seems like it's a little bit of arthritis, right? How come? Because you're wearing out. So it's unique to you for your first time, but if you
Right.
see enough people, it's a little different. And that's the fun thing about the business, and is then also talking to people that are coming at it from what they're selling, whether that's feeding money to Google or the software that they're promoting that day. And after you've been around for a couple decades, you go, this sounds familiar. This was all exciting 15 years ago.
Yep.
Sounds like the same thing that they talked about 15 years ago went away,
Yep.
right? So it's just a fascinating experience to be a part of, right? And it sounds so much like catalogers, right? So catalogers remember the world was going to change in 2000. And so they all said, we don't need catalogs anymore. I remember that vividly. And then they all said, we're going to stop wasting all this money. And in about 2001 to 2002, all the catalogers, you go to the trade events, and they were thinking it was the end times because product sales had fallen off the table. And what did they do? The ones that made it through the early e-commerce startup guys did some catalogs to the people that were worth mailing to. Not everybody, right?
Right.
But base. And a lot of what we did with the modeling was really built on the same premise that the politicians use, right? We just went through an election. They slice and dice. They know exactly who's likely to buy, who's going to buy, no matter what you do, right? And I just need to move. I just need to nudge the needle a little bit, and then the rest is history. So we originally built a model. I used a data shop in DC that was guys that were data modelers for politicians. I've said this to people before. I actually used the shop that did John McCain's model, and he just kind of said, "Okay, here's what I think's going on. Here's what I think I'm seeing. You tell me. And then you get the math wizards,
Right.
and then they go, okay, well, you missed this, or tease this up a little. This is how much this is weighted. This one's not. And that was kind of the premise of it. Yeah.
So for a pivot from one industry to the other, and very quickly became basically an expert in the space. I know that from the events that we would go to, you and I would have a conversation. I'd walk away, and someone would say, pull me aside and like, "Do you understand what he said?"
No, he's not
I
very good.
I did
He's
because I'd
not
had
very
my
good at explaining anything.
right. Well, I had my own business from years ago, and I remember, the marketing and my God, we want to get to this type of person. This is our ideal person, with the data and what have you to be able to figure these things out. I remember I would have these long-winded conversations with marketing companies saying, "You're not understanding what I'm trying to say. This is what my ideal person looks like. Let's expand it out a little bit and capture this type of person. This is what works best." And you have that ability to be able to go ahead and do that. And obviously, you were incredibly successful for your clients. The track record was there. You built up an incredible business with Stochastic. And did we close that out? Was that the beginning of last year, I think?
Yeah, that transaction was February of 2024.
Or
Right.
yep.
And then there's, because I wanted to retire, right? It just was the right time for me personally. So I wanted to retire, and I wanted to get more resources to take, like all business owners, you want the business to go to the next level. It's like a child, right? You want it to thrive. And when you're an owner, you kind of, do I continue to invest in the business, or do I just blow it? Right, spend the money. So I mean, that's kind of the decision we all kind of have, right?
Yep.
And so the sale for me, and the process to try and take our business and find someone that wanted to take it to the next level was maybe a little harder for SF&P to do than, say, a plumber or an HVAC guy, where there's a ready market and there's hundreds of buyers and hundreds of sellers. Ours was a little bit different. To your point, I'm sure some of these guys that you talk to said, "Do you understand what these guys do?" I mean, and they go, "Well, mail. We don't want a mail company." I go, "Well, that's just how we monetize it. It really wasn't what we do. It
Right.
just was how we monetized it." So um, that really got concluded in February of 2024. It took about 12 months before that. There was some cleanup of data, right?
Yep.
Um, which SF&P had great resources to do that. Non-judgmental, I will add. Most people that run a small business kind of have some things that are not a CPA doesn't like, right? You
Right.
you may have a bunch of ATVs or boats on the books as a truck, and so I didn't have any of that, but that's been pretty common for a long time,
Oh
right?
yeah.
When the accountant comes back and goes, "When I come back, that better be off the books." And I know it's in your shop, but I don't know that the boat's really a dig truck. So SF&P went through that and helped clean up that process, and then you kind of date around a little bit, and you find somewhere that's not a complete love connection, and you go through that process. But then once the transaction was completed, it's not like selling a car, right? Where you go, "Here are the keys, God love you." There's 6 months of, okay, I'm here to do whatever you want, right?
Yep.
And you got to remember, you sold the business. So it's kind of like putting a child up for adoption. You don't get to hover around and say, "This is how I'd like you to raise the child. I turned it over, and it's your child now," right? And off you go. And then in my case, because unlike a lot of the listeners, you know, our business was in most states in the continental US. So then that can lead to tax paperwork that you still have to be aware of. You may get a notice from some knucklehead in a state that you did $20,000 in business with, and there's some clerk somewhere that says you didn't file your monthly sales tax report, and you go,
Right.
"Well, I'm not selling anything, so it's zero." Well, that doesn't matter. You still have to fill the
There's
bureaucracy.
dotting the I's and the crossing of the T's. And you make a really good point with two things there, by the way. One, every this group of owners coming up, right? there's been these roadmaps where some guys have had incredibly successful exits, and you know, we've been blessed. We've handled a lot of those, and it's been great. And and then you got another group that they want to go, hey, I want to build this $100 million business. I want to build this 200, you know. And I think what everybody fails to forget, it's not easy. Like with every layer of growth that you get, there's more responsibility, more people, more this, more delegation, more management, like more and more and more and more and more. And it's not this mom and pop that you grew up building. It takes on a different life of its own. And some people thrive on that, some don't. You kind of have to be aware of where you do your best and where you don't. I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to, Mike. Well, we're having these conversations for 3 years and they're still at this $8 to $10 million level. It's difficult to turn around to an owner who, listen, 8 to 10 million is incredibly successful, but to say you're not growing because of you. Like, you know what I mean? Like you have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, I got it to here, which is 1%, by the way. You know what I mean? But if I want to go another place, I got to have the partner to bring in some resources to be able to go ahead and do some of these things to be able to.
Yeah, like, and he said, I mean, you got to realize I probably had the joy of watching 40 or more contractors
Sure.
either grow organically and sell, or use our modeling to identify areas where they'd have a hard time growing organically and they'd do tuck-ins. And then, you know, guys that would do make their exit, you know, you got guys that you have personal relationships with who are getting over $100 million
Really good paydays.
cash, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's fantastic. That's, you know, you're happy for everybody involved. But, you know, the OGs of the industry, and I'm just picking on them, Ken Goodrich is an example.
Hmm.
There'll be a guy who has this vision, I want to be like Ken, right?
Yep.
Sometimes I would go, well, you needed to start it a little earlier. So you had to have some of your life experiences that are similar, like 25 years earlier than you're having them now. So you don't
Right.
have enough runway, to be
Yep.
honest, to be brutally honest, that you're going to do this, you know, and you're like you said, you've gotten it to 20 million or 10 million. And in my case, I didn't see myself or my personal skill set. That's really not me, is building up and managing a whole ton of people. I can stare at a wall of numbers and kind of see a pattern and have conversations with people and sell. And that's about what I'm pretty good at, right?
Sure.
And so managing a bunch of 25-year-olds who are doing digital advertising and marketing and so forth, I'm like, oh, that doesn't sound like much fun to me, right? So like you said, you know, okay, well, this business got to where it is. You know, I'd had other businesses where I had hundreds of employees,
Yep.
right? But they were more of a production environment. So managing people in a production environment is a lot easier than managing people who are going into houses. You know, there's a clock and all the jobs have to get done, and 3 o'clock everything's on the pallets and then they go off in the trucks. And so their worker bees are in their slots doing what their job is, or feeding stuff into machines.
Right.
That's different than HVAC and plumbing to some extent. It's certainly different for people that are grinding numbers or trying to get mail production out. So you know, there are a lot of guys who are enjoying doing roll-ins and tuck-ins, and that makes them excited because they spent 20 years being in charge of a plumbing business, and now they're doing tuck-ins and they're having lots of conversations.
Sure.
And to your point, some guys are good at that, other guys aren't, and it's always fun to see the guys who are find themselves actually being good at that, right?
It's just about what your goals are, right?
Yeah.
And you know, there's a term, right? That rising tide lifts all boats. So I remember when we finished in 2017, when we finished Ken Goodrich's deal and Dave Geiger's deal, for example, and these at the time were the biggest deals I think ever to happen in the space. You know, and the word start getting out, obviously, that these deals got accomplished. People are like, oh my God, this exists. And all of a sudden it opened people's minds to say, wow, we could grow bigger, we could do bigger things. Listen, those were milestone deals. These are OGs in the space, right? Kenny Haynes as well. You can lump him in there as well.
Yeah, right.
And now you fast forward and okay, we do deals of that size. Like, I don't want to say it's common, but it's more common than it was before. These guys have grown these businesses up. It is incredibly impressive what's going on. You've got a lot of new buyers, obviously, that flooded the marketplace. And if you take a look, just what's going on here in the last couple months, right? Fourth quarter, Service Titan went public. Sela did a monster deal for
Right.
a number that started with a B. And you start to say, wow, there is a ton of money that's in the space. But something you had said from before, another piece that I wanted to bring up, when we first started talking, you had an idea, hey, I want to exit, right? Let's start having a conversation about this way earlier than necessary to be able to make something happen. You, as a business owner, were smart enough to understand that, hey, I do things one way, and I'm not sure whether or not that is the right way. So let's get our arms around the numbers. Because if we do it early enough, right? The beautiful thing about the deal that we did with you is that we worked with you for a year leading up to the successful transaction, right? To it closing. We were able to see where everything was at. I think Leona worked with you, correct?
Yeah. So right. So everybody that's listening, for the most part, is running a business and has a day job, and you don't have a ton of time to like free time to do it. And also, you've got people, your in-house bookkeeping and accounting, your IT guy, your CPA. Those guys don't like any changes. They don't like people questioning what they're doing
Mm-hmm.
because they might not be the smartest guy in the room or they might have done something the wrong way. So just waltzing into the accounting department saying, here's what I need, right? Can bog you down. And so
Yep.
you maybe you try it and then you get such pushback, you ignore it. And then you say, well, I'll worry about that later. In your case, Leona was able to go, okay, here, we'll just keep this quiet. We're just trying to figure out what's going on. What do the numbers say? Come look at my books. And you just kind of, here's a login and password to QuickBooks, right? As an example, right? And QuickBooks is so common all over the place. So
Yep.
Leona looks at it and goes, this is what I do all day. Most of us, our accountant, our bookkeepers, worried about payroll and paying the vendors and getting notices from the local municipality about business taxes or whatever the hell they're doing. They've got a full-time job too. So with your resources, Leona gets in there, checks it all out, walks it going. Okay, let me look back. Now let me look back through. Now that I figured out how you're doing your accounting, no
Yep.
judgment value here. Let's go
Right.
back
Correct.
3 years or so, and okay, and then there's some interrogation which leads you as a business owner to go, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way. Okay, I get it. All right. Okay. Okay, now that I've got your accounting cleaned up, now you can, Brian or Ryan can come back and go, well, let's do the what ifs. Here's what would happen to your EBITDA. Then if these are multiples and these are the ranges, then you go, holy shit. So these are the things I need to work in my business that really financially would benefit me. And I'm going to have to answer those questions with someone who's you're wanting them to give you a check. So
Yep.
they have the right to ask you a lot of pointed
A
questions
lot of
and you better
questions.
have an answer, right? You can't just go, it was COVID or we got hot that year, right?
Right.
It was, that kind,
You
right?
have to have a little more sophisticated answer than that.
Right. And so that process is kind of eye-opening, right? And it's also kind of comforting if you're doing a halfway decent job to have someone say, you're not a complete knucklehead. This isn't, we've seen much worse, right? Right. We've seen much worse, but that takes time. That doesn't happen. And you don't want to have that conversation when someone just had a heart attack and the doctor said, no, man, you can't do this anymore. Right. So I think we probably started having those conversations maybe 2021 or something like that, somewhere around there. And it was a little bit of an intellectual exercise. And then the market's doing what it's doing, and PE firms are buying up your customers, my customers, and you're seeing those guys have some great exits. It's fantastic for them. You're happy for them. And then guys start, including some of the OGs, like you talked about, going, Stochastic's been doing this for years. It's time for you to get paid. Everybody else is getting paid. Why aren't you getting paid? And you go, well, I don't think I'm going to get the multiple that you're getting, but okay, well, so you're not choosing zero. You
Right.
just work till you, are you just going to work till you die, or what's the deal, right? And you got employees that you need to take care of, and if you know, and so you go as a typical business owner, you don't take any vacations, right? You're the phone rings, and I mean, I can't even ignore spam calls for years because I get a phone call from North Carolina or Oregon or whatever else. It might be a contractor. So
Yep.
you're at having dinner with your family. The phone rings, and you're answering some call from some knucklehead who wants to, give money to some politician. So um, you try to get control over your life and your time schedule, and the sale is sometimes the only way to do that, right?
You're right, and starting early is the key. I mean, in the last, listen, I've talked to contractors all day long. Like if anybody saw my schedule, like I know I post stuff on Facebook, all it looks like I do is golf. Trust me, nothing could be further from the
It
truth.
seems that way from an outsider. I think
Yes, I totally understand. We can all make our Facebook persona look to be whatever it needs to be.
yeah, you
I,
have hair on your book, your page.
yes, I thought we swapped that out, but I'll have to check. But yesterday was 10 hours worth of calls, every half an hour on, boom, 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 but when the day was over, I'd used up my word allotment. I was done. I think I shut the phone off and stared at the television. But the point is, in the last 2 weeks, I spoke to three guys whose deals blew up, right? And now they're calling me. And I said, well, tell me what happened. Well, I got a phone call. Well, somebody said they were going to give me a number. The number made sense. I signed an LOI. I'm like, well, who determined your EBITDA? Well, they did. What? No, 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 no.
So it was a low number.
Yeah, they don't. I said they don't dictate to you what your EBIT is. When you hire the right person, we do the work. We measure everything out. We tell you where it's at. I want to get an understanding of what your forecast looks like for the next year, maybe two. You tell me if this is going up into the right. And what did you just do the last year? Can we comp over some of these months to be able to add to EBITDA? Like there is a game within the game of this that most people don't understand. I don't expect them to understand. And even if they understood it, they still wouldn't be able to play it. Right? This is the whole point of experience. You hired us because of our experience. You know your clients that did deals with us. You had a tremendous amount of respect for
Right.
them before. You're saying, my God, if the smartest guys in the room are choosing SF&P, I'm going to do the same thing. But if I have the runway, it doesn't matter if you've made a mistake. I've got time to flesh it out. You know what I mean? Time to flush these things out, work through them to be able to get you to another place. And my God, worst case scenario is, it's going to take a little bit longer because some numbers need to fall off or we need to revamp a couple things. Best case is, holy shit, this is amazing. Here's where you're at. Let me know if this number works for you. Let's go see if we can't chase it. You
Yes.
know?
For instance, the key people at my business had no idea what was going on,
Yep.
right? So we were having conversations with prospective buyers off and on. I had some personal stuff that made me kind of take a pause there for a little bit, but
Right.
for a year, right? And so because of SF&P doing most of that analysis, and the people that were doing grinding the sausage didn't know it was going on. Now, some of them go, it seems like Mike's got the door closed for some
Right.
oddly, right? But it could be because he's on the speakerphone talking to contractors all day. It's the same thing
Right.
you're doing, right?
Right.
But there's a process. For instance, you use the analogy of you got to talk with someone who understands what's going on and what the market is and can clean that all up. And so if you look at Major League Baseball as an example, right? If you don't, if you're some high school kid that doesn't have a draft advisor or an agent, the MLB teams don't really want to draft you because they don't, you're the parents of the
Yeah.
17-year-old. You think my kid's he's a first round draft choice, or
Yep.
he's going to be and he should be get $7 million plus this, and this, right? Well, you need someone who says, I do this every year for 30 years now, and here's what your kid looks like. And this is a band of reasonable numbers. And a lot of that final number is going to depend on other things that you have no control over.
Yep.
And that's just the way it is,
Yeah,
right?
for people that understand the baseball analogy, you are 100% right. Mike, when a buyer chases a deal, when private equity chases a deal, and the deal's unrepresented, meaning the owner's representing themselves, The dip out rate is probably 70+%. Means there's a greater than 70% chance, probably 80% or more, that it's not going to close. Because a lot of the negotiation is based upon the owner's word. Not that the owner is wrong. Oftentimes the owner just doesn't know. Now the buyer has to try and friend up with the owner so they could see the numbers. They could say to the owner, hey, here's where you are. My God, if you know, who does it that way? Nobody does. So now private equity knows they need 10 of those type of scenarios to get one of them done. So they know they're going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars chasing a deal. And if they get you an LOI and the diligence and all the other stuff, they can never give you the best offer because they know the propensity of it closing is probably 10% or less. Now, if you're represented by us and we take you to market, the buyer knows this person's committed. They've known SF&P for quite some time. We've gone through the numbers, worked through every scenario so they understand what all the outcomes could be, all the options. We understand if the person wants to stay or go, or let's have conversations and figure out what the next step's going to look like. The buyer can move forward confidently with a big step and a big number. And I get asked that all the time. How come SF&P gets these numbers for their clients that, I don't hear about it when the guys are doing their deals by themselves? I'm like, well, when you're my client, you're getting a deal. Like we're going to get, the only reason why you're not doing a deal is we didn't get your number. Your number's not there. We just might need a little bit more time. But yeah, you're 100% right. There is an emotional piece of this. It's funny. And you remember this because we've had enough conversations. You become our client. I actually almost become your therapist. Like I may not talk to you during the day, right? Because you've got Ryan and Ben and Justin and Fred or Darcy, Leona, like everybody in the office is working through the nuts and bolts of it. And then it's after hours where I get the phone calls. Hey, can we talk? Here's how I'm feeling. What's going on here? Like where we have a, different level of conversation. And that goes on through the entire process of the deal. Listen, we've handled hundreds of these. We kind of have an idea, of what's going on with these. It's, I love it. And I think what made it part of such a great successful transaction in doing the deal with you is that you realized, hey, here's what I am really good at. And I've gotten to this point, and I'm not going to beat my head against the wall trying to figure out how to go to this whole next point. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, very much so. And you have to, everybody's in a different place, right? Some guys have multiple generations
Oh
and
yeah.
and I had uh, uh, some guys in St. Louis here that are very, very successful young guys, and I went to school with their mother, and and I saw them at a social event. I said, you got to be so proud of your boys. They've taken the business to the next level, and so forth and so on. And some other mutual acquaintances of ours, same when we're talking to them, and I was explaining what a great job these young guys are doing, and well, those young guys are talking up like they're going to take over they're going to be the OGs, right? And I said to him, I go, yeah, not bad shit happens sometimes.
I
So
agree. Yep.
I can't say that you shouldn't just pull over to the side and take the money and that's a personal decision, but you know open the Wall Street Journal and look at a lot of those names, and Kodak and Xerox aren't where they thought they'd be.
It,
And
it's a diversification of assets. You
right.
look at these businesses and what they throw off to you, and you're like, with all the risk that you have to take to be able to get what you get out of the business, my God, in a good stock year, you do better in the market than you do with that. I mean, imagine, we taught these conversations, you have rental properties, warehouse properties, all these other things that are, I don't say no risk. Everything has a risk, but it's got an underlying asset that has a value to it. If the world went to hell in a handbasket, you've got an asset that has an underlying value to it. But you take a look. There were a couple scenarios that just happened within the last 5 years. Folks figured out how to get through COVID. The strong survived getting out of COVID. How many people when it? I should have kept a number of how many people I was having conversations with that were contemplating wanting to do a deal. COVID hit, and they were nowhere to be found again. Like they are still trying to come up from under it. That's one, and then you just haven't went on last year and at the end of 2023, where the quote unquote the market dipped a little bit, and all these folks that have these businesses that have dropped off, and some of them significantly, right? Because they didn't know how to weather that storm. Nice thing is we're in a much better scenario right now. You and I both understand that. Most of the people in our space do too. I think the next 2 years are going to be absolutely incredible. You're going to have a number of other exits from some of these big private equity groups that are going to happen again this year. That rising tide is going to lift boats again. The news is going to continue to circulate around our space. I think in the midterm, he's going to get Trump's going to get a report card that's going to say he's either doing what he said he's going to do and everybody is excited for the next 2 years, or maybe there might be a little stalling because we're
Well,
not.
the capital gains is a big deal, right? And so that clarity is a big deal, right?
Mhm.
And that you can just get me worked up into a lather about why I have to pay a second time or the estate tax,
Right.
but how you plan all that, and you sell a business, and thank God, it's a very much a first world problem. You got to figure out how to set up trusts and roll the
Yep.
money in to avoid taxes for your kids or whatever you're concerned about.
Yep.
But that's all part of the whole process that you have to think about when you're thinking about selling your business, right? Um, and sometimes you just have to realize that whatever business you sold doesn't mean you're really that smart. Sometimes you just got lucky, right? Very much so. So one of the things that I've been able to do is I have a farm down in the Missouri Ozarks. It's talk about just being lucky, right? So I've been screwing around intellectually. Genetics for cattle and other stuff appeals to me, right? And so I can, people go, you should run some cattle. And I asked the neighbors we should partner up and run some cattle, right? So long story short, first couple of weeks of November this year, we had one of those climate change storms.
Right.
So
You were
the
telling me about this, right? With the
so
flooding.
the river that runs along my place for about a mile came up 12 feet, which is 4 feet. So my pasture was under 4 feet of water. And the pasture that would have had 100 head of cattle in it, the fence washed over. So sometimes you just have to get lucky. If I had put the cattle in there, they would have wandered off.
Right.
It isn't like Yellowstone. There's no guy I call to take care of that. I'd be walking around in the dark with a flashlight going, here, cow, come in. So sometimes you just get lucky, right? But, some of these guys, and you set up a shop to build race cars, or you buy a sailboat and run around the Caribbean, or you buy some cattle or whatever you want to do. The exit strategy allows you to do that. And some of those conversations, you got to figure out what are you going to do when you
Yep.
don't come into work anymore. And that may
Yep.
be goofing off, or you may do charity or not for profit or whatever.
Right. And some of these younger guys, they get back involved with something ancillary to the space that doesn't hurt their non-compete.
Right.
A lot of them stay on post-transaction and continue to work with the partner. It's almost like, how do I say that? Listen, I've had plenty of these conversations, and one of them, the theme that runs true is when I did my deal with my partner, oh my God, I shut the work phone off at 4:30 or 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock
Wasn't your problem anymore.
or
Right.
1 o'clock on a Friday. Like I got a partner. When there's an issue, I no longer have to rack my brain till 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning for another sleepless night. I've got a partner to be able to have a conversation with that says, hey, here's what's going on. Or I look at the checkbook, right? I got trucks I got to pick up, right? I got payroll that has to happen, or all these other fun things that we all know that stress us out. Trust me, as a prior business owner, I remember like it was yesterday saying, oh yeah, I got the partner. We budgeted for this already. What's the growth look like? Or I can't find people. Or two guys just quit, right? Whatever. Like part of being a business owner is just constantly putting out fires. Well, when you got a partner with you, fires aren't as big. They're not as hot as they were from before. You let your partner know. Usually they're always a step or two ahead. So again, we talk about that partner thing, and I have these conversations. What do you need? What would help your business get from point A to point B? I need more people. No problem. So let's look for private equity partners, the ability to go ahead and recruit for you. What else do you need? Our marketing's all over the place. Great. Let's find a private, like when you start to understand where they think the holes are in their business, and we have these conversations back and forth with these potential partners, these private equity groups, the questions get asked. Like, there's just some misconceptions about how deals are done. And honestly, Mike, what I wish was that just everybody would call me and spend a half an hour on a call so I could roll through what it all looks like because you'll be enlightened, right? You get some really good ideas of what's going on. And obviously, hopefully, you become a client of ours. We can make you do some great, successful things for you too, just like we did for you. But it's a crazy space. It's going to continue like this. That goes without saying. I think the runway on this is a lot of years. But to your point, you got the ability to take money off the table and go live and do some things for a little while. Like what I have seen is some of these guys take a pause, right? They get out, they bring the partner in, maybe the second flip has happened and that they're quote unquote retired now, and they get to take a breath and a reset. And then they really get to make a decision at that point in time, differently than any other decision they've ever made in their lives. Do I want to go back into this now with all the new knowledge that I've seen grown from now that I'm on the other side? Or, hey, that was a really fun run. There's a lot of other fun things that I want to go ahead and do.
There are a
There's a
lot of those phone
choice.
calls. Yeah. A lot of those guys, I get those for years. I would get those phone calls and they'd done their exit and
Yep.
then they went on their cruises
Yep.
and for 6 months or so. And then they got bored and then they'd call me and they say, Mike, I'm thinking about buying opening a location in fill in the blank city. Right. And you do this analysis. And I would laugh and go, is your non-compete over? Because it seems like a long way from where you're living. And they
Hmm.
go, yeah, well, it's a great market. I go, well, yeah, sure it is. But so you're that bored already that you decided you're going to buy a business that's 3 time zones away from where you actually know something
Hmm.
about it. Like, well, I can't legally do business in, just to pick,
Right.
Georgia, Alabama, and Florida.
Right.
Okay, so Colorado is okay.
It's a different environment. There are a lot of things that you could do. There's coaching programs that you can go become a part of, and I've seen that happen, by the way. And that is
Some
one of
guys
the
are good at that, some guys aren't, right?
right, correct. But my point is, there's so many different ways that you could do stuff. I see some clients, they get together with marketing companies. They understand it differently. They know how to have a conversation, with a business owner. It's coaching, it's marketing, whatever. Listen, go to any event, go take a walk around and see all the different services that are available. Find one that you say, hey, I really align with that. That sounds pretty cool. You could be working with somebody and really be giving back and helping owners. Listen, Service Roundtable has an AB group, right? It's a
Right.
coaching situation for these guys that are incredibly successful and or have had successful exits, and they're mentoring another half a dozen or so. Lou Habaika does it, Joe Strittmatter, two good friends of mine
Yeah,
that
yeah.
do those coaching scenarios, and that's been absolutely incredible for them. So they're still tied in, to what's going on, and I don't say vested, but they have an interest in the success of the people that they're working with, and they're not out of the business. So there's so many different ways to slice and dice this. By the way, that's the worst problem you should have, is not knowing what to do now that you made all this money. The world's your oyster to be able to have all these options. You realize how many people out of 100, I don't even know if it's one out of 100, you might have to go to 1,000. So there's a handful out of 1,000 that get to that point in their lives to be able to have the options and choices to be able to do what they want because they have the financial wherewithal to be able to go ahead and do it. Right.
Right.
So we're blessed to be in the space, when you really boil it down, that has had so much success for so long. And it's like almost every other week there's another news report about something great that's happened. You know, Fun times, man.
Yep. And you can see it just driving around. You can see that the roofers
Yep.
are upgrading their marketing to be like HVAC guys 15 years ago, and they're
Yeah.
getting professional because they're getting the message. The garage door guys are doing it, and it's making it. And so you've got some guys who are saying, you know what, I'm a home services company. If I already went from HVAC to HVAC plumbing to HVAC plumbing electrical, okay, well, I'll buy this roofing company. And, and that, that's not the stage where I'm in my life,
No,
but, but
you weren't looking for more challenge, right?
right. Or it just didn't fit for me,
Different
right?
challenge.
Everybody's got a, what's the old joke? Your man's got from Clint Eastwood, a man's got to know his limitations, right?
Sure.
And and I figured out, you know what, this has worked out okay. Somehow
You,
I wound up in the end zone. I'm not going to look at the jumbotron and say, how'd that happen? I need to run the play again. I'm here, so it's good.
roofers, garage door guys. Listen, I've been to a number of Tommy Mello's Home Service Freedom events.
Yeah.
I didn't realize there were, I mean, you have to see the number of services that are growing at some of these numbers, right? A power washing business, doing 8 figures, a chimney
Oh, yeah.
company, the guys building the outdoor decks and the patios. There is so much that are all growing now. They're making themselves efficient. So when we talk about that rising tide lifting all boats, you take a look at some of these exits, some of these things these guys have built. You guys say, man, if they could do it, I could do it too. So it's an exciting time. I think it continues on for a number of years.
And are you
Obviously,
guys getting into that? You're getting into those other verticals too? I
we
know you
have
were
been.
looking around.
They
Yeah.
have been. They've been, unfortunately, they've been smaller. Listen, private equity wants a certain number, certain revenue number,
Right.
or certain EBITDA number to make a deal happen. And again, they want size and scale, right? Size and scale, size and scale, size and scale. Sometimes some of those other businesses, it's tougher to get to that size and that scale. You need to bring people in, right? You got to empower employees. You got to bring these non-revenue generating employees like managers, sales managers, and phone room managers, and people that aren't going to generate revenue. And then all of a sudden, you see your profits start to drop off. And oh my God, my profits dropped off. Yeah, but your top line grew, and ultimately you're making more money. You needed to have some people in place because you're only one person. You
Right.
needed three of you, right? So you had to go hire, another couple that could be close enough to you to be able to help you run, manage, and grow the business. It just depends on what your goals are. This is why I say, Mike, for everybody, it's never too early to have a conversation with me. I don't beat anybody up. Take your time. Let's have a conversation. Tell me where you think you're going right and where you're going wrong. I had once this closes, I have we have one here. I think this should probably close sometime this year. That really really cool conversation. The point being is, if I get understanding what your business is and get understanding of what you are, it's really easy to make a determination of what's going to be best for you. And whether that's doing something now or in 3 to 5 years, can I tell you how many conversations I've had where I said, listen, you got a couple years of runway in front of you to get to the point you want to go to. Let's just keep in touch and get an idea where things are at. And that's how it works. Doing a deal only works best when you want it to happen, not when I want it to happen.
Yeah, I tried to send a couple of different marketing services companies your way, and so they were fishing around. They knew they needed to think about it because you don't
Right.
live forever, right?
Yep.
And they knew that they'd gotten their business to the size where it wasn't getting any better. They'd hit their ceiling and they
Yep.
were stuck there. And that's
Yep.
because you got to make a big jump in some case to bring in the right people to take it to the next level. You have to be making enough money that you can do that with,
Yep.
you don't want to mortgage your second mortgage on the house to hire a guy who may leave you. So they have a
Yep.
lot of those conversations. And I said, well, you got to have some understanding of what's going on in your numbers, and you may need to clean some things up, and that
Hmm.
may take 3 years. So you need to talk to somebody, and you send them your way. Say, well, what do you mean? I go, well, they'll. What are your number? How are you? How's your accounting? And they all, him and Hall. Well, it's this. Okay, they're not going to judge you that you've been hiding money, or they're not charging
Ever.
you with the IRS. But if you're not really confident, where you say, you know what, I am making so much money and it's so scalable and it's such a great business, if you start backing away from having the first date, like I'm not really ready yet. Okay, then that's why you need to have a conversation now, because it's going to take a few years. If you're not ready today, I haven't had a really great year. Okay, well, you need to talk to, maybe someone needs to look at the numbers and go, you had a down year, but it's been three, you've been okay, or what do you need to do to get up to the next level? Or to your point, it's a numbers game. So the PE firms, they have a lot of expense, just like you guys do, right?
Yep.
It's there's a lot of due diligence. There's a lot of accounting. I always shook my head about it. I said, what are you guys spending on legal fees from your side of it? It's crazy. How many?
They can't.
Right.
They raise money. They got people they got an answer to. If something doesn't go the way they think it's going to go, there's questions. And remember, they raise money on these funds. It's hard to raise for another fund when you have one that blew out. You know what I
Right.
mean?
And
They
so,
want
you know, they're answering to some guy who went to Harvard and he doesn't give a shit. He's just like, look, man, I gotta burn through my numbers, and I gave you this money, and where's my money back? Prano Jr. here. And
to.
And I mean, that's the pressure they're under, right? It's not their money either, right? Remember, it's your money, but it's not their money
Right.
most of the, right? So
Right. Yeah.
they're a financial professional, and so you need to talk to somebody to get your numbers ready, because those guys don't want any risk. Why should they,
They want
right?
to mitigate risk as much as possible.
Right.
Right. So
And
they
so,
re- they re- they rely on us to say,
right.
hey, we vetted out this business. Here's where they are. Here's where they're going. And based upon what we're showing you, bid accordingly. Right.
And those conversations are happening without the business owner. Like that's
Correct.
you and whoever you're talking to,
Yep.
because they know the owner's interests are, I want to hide my sins and get the most money. And you need someone to go, yeah, this is how he's doing his books. This is legitimate. Okay, what else?
We vetted
Well,
it all out. Yeah. I
right. So
mean,
it's a good process, and I see it from both sides and saw it from both sides, where PE firms would buy customers of mine. And I think that was one of the most frustrating things for me, is just like a contractor, I wanted long-term, lifetime relationships with contractors. We all do. Contractors want to own the home.
Yep.
Well, the contractors may go to an event and see something flashy that they like, and then they call you and say, I'm changing my budget around. Well, that doesn't mean they're divorcing you. They're just like not seeing you for a while, and then they come back a few months later, and that's okay. So the PE firms accelerate that,
Yep.
right? And but okay, they're a 30-year-old analyst, just like you've got 30-year-old analysts, and they're answering to their boss, and they
Yep.
what's the easiest thing for them to do for advertising? Shovel money to Google, right? What's the easiest? Service Titan. Okay, so the trend that is kind of interesting to kind of see, this HVAC Direct is showing up again. I've been watching it. I might be just be susceptible to some of the advertising, but HVAC Direct, they're shipping product to the DIY guys. Okay, that's a different trend. It's been around, but is it big? I don't know.
The
Uh,
DIY guys have always been there. They're always going to do their thing. It's not who your guy's going to wind up being. You know, what I learned a long time ago in sales is not everybody's going to be your client, and you
right.
don't want everybody to be your client, right? There's some people, doesn't matter if you were giving it away for free, then they're
So
not going to do business with you. So,
So a lot of the stuff in the mirror score talked about the things that the contractor does when he goes into homes. And all I can see from all the math is that's the most important thing. That's the magic silver bullet. Hiring, recruiting, training, and managing and motivating the people that go into the houses.
yep,
That's the whole deal. Everything
yep,
else can get fixed, right?
right,
Everything else can be fixed. If you've got the right team and the people are making more money than they ever made before because they're working for you and they're happy, then the business is scalable because you'll attract the right people. If they're
yep.
miserable and they're not making their money and their
See ya.
spouse says, why are you working overtime again? He's just going to lay you off or you're going to sit at home and it's slow. The trick is to have the people doing the right thing when they go into homes. Now, the trend is that the PE firms, the Sillas and all the rest of them, I'm not picking on them. Their numbers look like everybody else, although they were more in the Northeast. I thought it's a little
Yep.
different market than Texas, but um, you they're all using Service Titan. They're all using the Service Titan vendor base supply chain, if you will, and they're all funneling the money to Google. So there's a commoditization of the home service businesses, right? So they're getting more standardized. Their operating procedures are standardized. Their vendors are getting standardized
Sure.
pay rates and everything else. That just means that it's that much more important for the contractor, and we see it in the numbers, to do the magic, the people, right? The people are the magic. So
Still a people business.
right. So as scale gets up, you see that in the numbers. You get fewer of the A plus people and you get more of the C or C plus. And so the bigger guys, they'll win all day long if they run their business like if I'm a B minus, but I get scale. But that also means that the guys that's got a smaller team, that I'm just a $5 million guy that's got a couple of A plus star players that are real happy, he can fight and win and do just fine in the
Yep. All
midst
day
of the
long.
bigger guy.
And,
Right.
and by the way, be incredibly profitable. There's a number somewhere between 5 and 7 million where you have to start bringing management in. You notice
Right.
your profit starts to drop off, right? EBITDA drops off. I say drops off. I don't mean oh my God, it falls out of the
The
sky.
ratio the ratio
Normalize.
gets
It
the ratio
normalizes.
gets different. Right.
It
Because
normalizes.
it's
Right.
a math exercise. Right.
Yeah. I actually did a podcast about a year and a half ago with Lynn Wise with Contractor in Charge. We talked about growth.
Oh
And I'm
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
why do you want to grow? She's like, well, what do you mean? I said, listen, some guys, it's lifestyle business. They do $5 to $7 million a year. They don't have all these management people in place. They've known their employees for a million years. They're loyal to people. Their people are loyal to them. Everybody does well. Okay, but it's just a choice of which direction you want to go in. You know what I mean? And by the way, there's very successful deals that can happen at that level too. We've done plenty of them from that level, obviously up north of X hundreds of millions of dollars and everything in between. It's I think again, this is going to be a really another exciting year in 2025. I think it continues through in 2026. And then as 2026 progresses, we'll get an idea what the read for the next year or so is. But with all that being said, Thank you very much for your time today. I
Appreciate
appreciate it.
everything you guys did. Yeah, and
Yep.
I'd encourage anybody to have that initial conversation. If nothing else, it makes you think about what you want to accomplish, and not tomorrow, but like, okay, take a deep breath and figure out what you want to do. What do you want to be doing 5 years from now?
Yep.
Right? What do you want to do? Okay, let's start the path on that. All right.
I echo your sentiments, and I would love everybody to call me 3 to 5 years out to be able to have these conversations. It'll make for a much more successful exit for all involved.